She's going to kill me for this, but I've already moved Jason into the lake house. The divorce papers should be waiting when you get back from Singapore. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. That's how my wife of 12 years chose to end our marriage, through a pixelated video call while I was 9,000 miles from home, troubleshooting a critical infrastructure project that had already kept me away for 3 weeks. I remember staring at her image on my tablet, the hotel air conditioning humming in the background as she delivered this news with the casual tone of someone cancelling dinner plans. "I see," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "And the security system I installed last month?" Her smile faltered. "What about it?" "Nothing. We'll talk when I get back. I have a meeting in 5 minutes." I ended the call before she could respond. My name is Michael Anderson. At 43, I've spent the last 15 years as a water systems engineer for GreenFlow International, specializing in developing irrigation and clean water infrastructure in challenging environments. My work has taken me across 6 continents, from Saudi deserts to the mountains of Peru. I'm the guy they send when projects go sideways, when local conditions prove more difficult than anticipated, when cultural misunderstandings threaten timelines, or when equipment fails in ways the manuals never covered. I solve problems. I find workarounds. I make systems work. It's a trait that served me well professionally. GreenFlow pays me generously to fix what others can't. But in my personal life, this same problem-solving instinct led me to overlook warning signs I should have recognized years earlier. I was so focused on finding workarounds for our marriage's temporary challenges that I missed the systematic failure occurring right before my eyes. After ending that video call with Rebecca, I didn't slam my tablet against the wall or drown my sorrows at the hotel bar. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into the app connected to our lake house security system, the one I'd upgraded just before leaving for Singapore. The one with motion-activated cameras in every room, the one that stored footage in cloud. Storage Rebecca didn't know existed. The night before, I'd gotten an automated alert about motion detected in multiple rooms. I'd ignored it, assuming Rebecca had driven up for the weekend. Not unusual, especially when I was overseas. But now I needed to see exactly what was happening in the mountain retreat I'd spent 3 years renovating by hand. The footage loaded. Rebecca and a tall, athletic man I recognized as Jason Mills, her wellness coach from the gym, were touring our house like it was an open house showing. I watched with a strange detachment as they walked from room to room, discussing what furniture to keep and what to replace. "The couch definitely goes," Rebecca said with a laugh. "Mike's so attached to it because he claims it's perfectly broken in, but it looks like something from a college dorm." Jason ran his hand along the custom pine dining table I'd built from trees cleared from our property. "What about this? Seems pretty rustic." "God, no," Rebecca shuddered. "All this woodsy cabin stuff is Mike's outdated fantasy. We'll get something. Modern glass and steel, maybe." I watched as they moved upstairs to our bedroom, where they didn't just discuss furniture changes. I closed the laptop after a few seconds of that particular scene, a strange numbness spreading through me. I met Rebecca Cooper 14 years ago at a charity fundraiser in Denver. She was working for a boutique marketing agency, handling their event coordination. I was there representing GreenFlow, one of the sponsors. She wore a blue dress that matched her eyes, laughed easily, and seemed genuinely interested in my work bringing sustainable water solutions to developing regions. 2 years later, we married at the Denver Botanic Gardens, surrounded by friends and family who toasted our perfect compatibility. Career-driven but caring. Independent but committed to building something together. We bought the lake house in Grand Lake 5 years into our marriage. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, weathered cedar siding, and panoramic views of Shadow Mountain Lake with the Rocky Mountains rising beyond. At $750,000, it stretched our finances, but we both fell in love with the location just 3 hours from Denver, but worlds away from the city's constant demands. I'd spend long weekends replacing rotted deckboards, upgrading the kitchen with locally sourced granite, and installing a boathouse on the private dock. Rebecca focused on furnishing and decorating, creating what she called a sophisticated mountain aesthetic. We'd planned to retire there eventually, renting it out selectively in the meantime. "This is our forever place," she'd said on our first night there, raising a glass of wine as the sunset painted the mountains purple and gold. I'd believed her. For years we made it work. My international assignments meant frequent absences, but Rebecca would sometimes join me for the more interesting locations. A week in Barcelona after my project in southern Spain, an extended stay. In Kyoto, when I was working in rural Japan. We'd been good together, or so I thought. The first signs of trouble emerged about 3 years ago. The overseas trips she'd once eagerly anticipated became too disruptive to her work schedule. Our conversations grew shorter, more perfunctory. "Have a good meeting," and "safe travels" replaced "I miss you and can't wait until you're home." Then came the wellness journey, as she called it. A premium gym membership, personal training sessions 5 days a week, new workout clothes, and a diet overhaul. I supported her enthusiasm, even when it meant rearranging our limited time together around her training sessions with Jason, a former college athlete turned fitness entrepreneur. I didn't question the weekend wellness retreats that started appearing on our shared calendar, or the unexplained charges at restaurants I'd never heard of. Part of me knew, I suppose, but acknowledgement meant action, and I wasn't ready to face what those actions might be. After discovering the footage from our lake house, I didn't immediately call Rebecca back. Instead, I contacted 2 people. Ray Martinez, the security consultant who had installed our system, and Elaine Wong, an attorney who had helped GreenFlow navigate complex international contracts. "I need all footage backed up immediately and securely," I told Ray during our encrypted call, "and I need to know exactly what capabilities we have remotely." "Already happening," Ray assured me. "Your system uploads to triple redundant cloud storage, and since you went with the premium package, you have complete remote access. You can lock doors, adjust thermostats, activate the exterior lights and alarm, even make announcements through the integrated speakers." "Perfect," I said. "One more question. Can she disable it?" "Not without the master password, which only you have. She can turn off cameras temporarily while she's there using the guest access you set up, but she can't delete footage or permanently disable anything." Next, I called Elaine. "I need advice on a personal matter," I began, explaining the situation as clinically as possible. "First, don't confront her yet," Elaine advised after listening carefully. "Colorado is an equitable distribution state. For divorce, document everything. Who owns the lake house? It's in both our names." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "What about improvements? Have you documented your contributions to the property?" I had. Every renovation project was meticulously photographed, receipts saved, hours logged, a habit from my project management days. "Good," she continued. "And you mentioned she's planning to do what with the property?" "From what I overheard, they're discussing moving in together and eventually selling it, without your knowledge or consent, which she cannot legally do." "Michael, I don't normally take private divorce cases, but I'll make an exception. This is legally straightforward, but emotionally complex. You need representation that understands both aspects." After ending the call with Elaine, I sent a brief email to my project manager in Singapore, explaining that a family emergency required me to return home. Then I booked the first available flight to Denver. During the 20-hour journey, I didn't watch movies or review project notes. Instead, I formulated a plan. This wasn't about revenge. I'd seen too many bitter divorces among colleagues to believe that vengeance brought anything but prolonged pain. This was about justice, about ensuring that the life I'd built wasn't dismantled through deception. By the time the plane touched down in Denver, my path was clear. I wouldn't yell or plead or try to salvage what was obviously broken beyond repair. I would simply document, preserve, and protect what was rightfully mine in the most straightforward manner possible. I didn't tell Rebecca I was returning early. After landing, I rented a car and drove straight to our primary residence in Denver's Washington Park neighborhood. The house was empty, our cleaning lady informing me that Rebecca had mentioned spending the week at the lake house. Perfect. I packed essential documents, backed up our home computer, and collected the items of true sentimental value: my grandfather's pocket watch, photos from my time building wells in Ethiopia, the first blueprint I'd ever drawn as a student. Then I checked into a hotel downtown and messaged my friend Thomas Carter, asking to meet for coffee. Thomas had been my colleague at GreenFlow before starting his own environmental consulting firm. He was also one of the few people who knew both Rebecca and me well, having been a groomsman at our wedding. "I wondered when this conversation would happen," Thomas said after I explained the situation at Summit Brews, our usual meeting spot. "She's been different lately, more guarded when your name comes up." "You knew?" I asked, stirring my untouched coffee. Thomas sighed. "I suspected. About 6 months ago, I saw them together at the Mercantile downtown. It looked intimate. When I mentioned to Rebecca that I'd seen her, she said they were discussing a marketing strategy for his new fitness studio. I chose to believe her, but something felt off." "His new fitness studio," I repeated. "Tell me about that." "Jason's opening some high-end wellness center, integrated fitness experiences, or some buzzword salad like that. Rebecca's agency is apparently handling the branding." The pieces clicked into place. Rebecca's marketing agency worked exclusively with established businesses, not startups. She'd been investing time and possibly our money into Jason's new venture. "One more question," I said. "Has Rebecca mentioned anything about the lake house? Plans to sell, perhaps?" Thomas looked uncomfortable. "She asked me about property values in Grand Lake last month. Said you two were considering leveraging the asset, given how the mountain property market has exploded. I assumed it was a joint decision." I nodded, adding this information to my mental file. "Thanks for being honest. I've got some decisions to make." The next morning, I met with Elaine Wong at her downtown office. She'd already reviewed the security footage I'd provided and prepared preliminary divorce papers. "We have several options," she explained, laying out documents on her polished desk. "Colorado requires equitable distribution of marital assets, not necessarily equal. Given the circumstances, her infidelity, attempts to dispose of joint property. Without consent, possible misuse of joint funds, we have leverage." "I don't want to ruin her," I clarified. "I just want what's fair." "Fair is what we'll aim for," Elaine nodded. "But fair doesn't mean you absorb financial damage from her actions." Now about the lake house. We have two approaches. Fight for full ownership based on your substantial personal improvements and her misconduct, or force a sale and equitable distribution of proceeds. I thought about the countless weekends spent replacing the boathouse, roof in summer heat, installing the stone fireplace, and crafting built-in bookshelves for the living room. The property's value had increased significantly, partly due to the hot market, but largely because of my improvements. I want the lake house, I decided. It was supposed to be our forever home. It can still be mine. Then that's what we'll fight for, Elaine confirmed. Here's my suggested approach. Document everything, secure all financial accounts, then confront with evidence and a fair settlement offer. People facing overwhelming evidence often choose the path of least resistance. After leaving Elaine's office, I drove to my bank and spent 2 hours with a personal banker, separating our finances. I didn't empty joint accounts. That would be legally problematic. But I did ensure that my direct deposits and personal savings were secured from impulsive withdrawals. Next came the difficult but necessary step of notifying our families. I called my parents first, then my sister. I stuck to the essential facts without vilifying Rebecca. They responded with shock, then support, offering their homes if I needed a place to stay. I declined, preferring the neutral territory of my hotel while navigating these waters. I considered calling Rebecca's parents, but decided against it. That conversation belonged to her, though I did send them a brief, respectful email explaining that Rebecca and I were separating and that while circumstances were painful, I still respected them and appreciated their role in my life. 3 days after returning to Colorado, I was ready for the confrontation, not at our Denver house, that space felt contaminated now, but at the lake house, where the betrayal had played out in high-definition video. I drove the familiar winding mountain roads to Grand Lake on a crisp autumn morning. Golden aspen leaves shimmered against the deep green pines, and fresh snow dusted the highest peaks. Under different circumstances, I would have pulled over to photograph the scenery. Today, I drove straight through. As I approached our private road, I activated the Lake House security app on my phone. 2 heat signatures moved within the house, one in the kitchen, one in the upstairs bathroom. 2 vehicles in the driveway, Rebecca's Audi SUV and a black Jeep Wrangler I didn't recognize, Jason's presumably. I parked behind them, blocking both vehicles in our narrow driveway. Then I used my phone to activate the exterior lights, which began flashing, a feature Ray had installed as part of the security package. Through my phone's connection to the interior cameras, I watched Rebecca rush to the window in confusion. Rather than immediately entering, I sat in my car and used the home's speaker system. "Rebecca, this is Michael. I've returned from Singapore and would like to speak with both you and Jason. I'll be coming inside in 5 minutes. Please make yourselves presentable." The looks of shock on their faces, captured by my interior cameras and displayed on my phone, provided a moment of grim satisfaction. I watched them scramble, whisper fighting in the kitchen, Jason gesturing toward the back door as if suggesting escape. Rebecca shaking her head, straightening her clothes, preparing for confrontation. 5 minutes later, I unlocked the front door and stepped inside the home I had helped build. Rebecca stood in the living room, arms crossed, defensively. Jason hovered near the kitchen island, trying to project confidence, but repeatedly shifting his weight. "Michael," Rebecca began, her marketing-trained voice striving for control. "You should have called before coming to my own property," I interrupted calmly. "The lake house that's jointly owned and that you were planning to sell, without my knowledge or consent?" "That's not," she started. "It is," I countered, opening my phone to play a clip from the security footage. Their voices filled the room, discussing renovation plans and timeline for listing the property. The color drained from Rebecca's face. Jason took a step back, bumping into a bar stool. "You've been recording us? That's invasion of privacy!" Rebecca's shock transformed into outrage. "It's my security system in my home, which captured unauthorized occupants planning to illegally dispose of jointly owned property," I corrected her. "My attorney has reviewed the footage and confirms it's completely legal in Colorado." "You involved lawyers already?" Her voice rose. "We could have discussed this like adults." The irony of her statement hung in the air between us. I didn't need to point it out. "Rebecca, I didn't come here to argue. I came to inform you of what happens next." I placed a folder on the coffee table, the pine one I'd built last summer. These are divorce papers prepared by my attorney. They offer a straightforward division of assets. You keep the Denver house and your business interests. I keep the lake house and my retirement accounts. We divide the remaining assets equally. And if I don't agree, her chin lifted defiantly, then we proceed to a contested divorce, where I'll present evidence of adultery, attempted unauthorized sale of joint property, and potential misappropriation of marital funds for Jason's new business venture. The choice is yours. Jason, who had remained silent, finally spoke. You can't prove I've been involved in any financial... Actually, I interrupted, my forensic accountant has identified $127,000 transferred from our joint investment account to Mountain Wellness LLC over the past 8 months. A company registered to you 6 months ago. Would you like to explain that? He looked at Rebecca accusingly. She avoided his gaze. This doesn't have to be ugly, I continued. Sign the papers, return the funds improperly diverted to Jason's business, and we all move forward separately. I need to speak with my own lawyer, Rebecca insisted. Of course. You have 48 hours to provide a preliminary response. Until then, I'll be staying here at the lake house. You're both welcome to collect your personal belongings, but I'll need to be present during that process. You can't just throw me out of my own house. Rebecca's voice cracked with indignation. I'm not throwing you out of your house. The Denver property remains yours to use. This property, given the circumstances, will remain under my physical control until our divorce is finalized. My attorney has filed the appropriate notices with the county. Rebecca turned to Jason, perhaps expecting him to challenge me. Instead, he grabbed his jacket from a nearby chair. I'll wait in the car, he muttered to her. This is between you two. After Jason left, Rebecca's composed facade crumbled slightly. You've been planning this, she accused. All those business trips, always working late. You checked out of this marriage years ago. Jason actually sees me, values me. I won't debate perceptions, Rebecca. The facts and evidence speak for themselves. I gestured toward the door. Take whatever personal items you need now. You can arrange for the rest later this week. She grabbed her purse and coat but paused at the door. You know what's ironic, Michael? You built this place to bring us closer together, but you were never really here, always fixing someone else's problems halfway around the world. She left. Before I could respond, though I'm not sure what I would have said. Perhaps she was right. In her way, I had built systems and structures, believing they could sustain themselves with minimal maintenance. It was a professional blind spot I'd carried into my personal life. After they drove away, I walked through the house, noting changes they'd already made. Unfamiliar bedding, new artwork, a different coffee maker, small claims already staked. I spent the evening on the deck despite the autumn chill, watching darkness settle over the lake, the mountains disappearing into night. 2 days later, Rebecca's lawyer contacted Elaine. They wanted to negotiate rather than proceed to court. Smart decision. The evidence was overwhelming, and Colorado judges typically didn't look kindly on attempts to dispose of marital assets without consent. The negotiations took 3 weeks. Rebecca fought hardest over the lake house, claiming emotional attachment, but the documented evidence of her plans to sell it undermined her position. In the end, she accepted most of our initial terms with minor adjustments. She kept the Denver house and her business, returned 70% of the funds diverted to Jason's venture, and relinquished all claims to the lake house. I heard through mutual friends that she and Jason were still together, but that her marketing agency had lost clients after word spread of her messy personal situation. Their wellness center opened 3 months later on a significantly smaller scale than originally planned. I felt no satisfaction in their struggles, just a dull ache for what might have been if different choices had been made. The divorce finalized. 4 months after that fateful video call from Singapore. Clean, final, no ongoing entanglements. Now 10 months later, I'm sitting on the rebuilt deck of my lake house, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise over Shadow Mountain Lake. The property looks different now. I've replaced the living room furniture, including that admittedly shabby couch, repainted the exterior a deeper blue, and converted the third bedroom into a home office for the increasing remote work GreenFlow allows me. The changes aren't just cosmetic. I've declined 3 international assignments in favor of projects within North America. Not because I'm afraid to leave my property unattended, the security system remains state-of-the-art, but because I'm rebalancing priorities, recognizing that maintaining what matters requires presence, not just protection. My phone buzzes with a text from Thomas, who's driving up with his family to spend the weekend. They've become regular visitors, his children claiming the bunk beds in the second bedroom as theirs. I've discovered I enjoy sharing this space, contrary to my expectations of solitary healing. As I watch a pair of ospreys circle above the water, I reflect on what I've learned. Systems fail without maintenance. Trust requires verification. And sometimes what appears to be the end of one path simply reveals the beginning of another. The mountains reflect perfectly in the still morning water, mirrored yet distinct. There's something profound in that duality, the original and its reflection, both real in their own way, both changed by the slightest ripple. I finish my coffee and head inside to prepare for my guests. The house is just a house, wood and glass and stone, but it's mine. And sometimes that's enough. After discovering the footage from our lake house, I didn't immediately call Rebecca. Back. Instead, I contacted 2 people, Ray Martinez, the security consultant who had installed our system, and Elaine Wong, an attorney who had helped GreenFlow navigate complex international contracts. I need all footage backed up immediately and securely, I told Ray during our encrypted call, and I need to know exactly what capabilities we have remotely. Already happening, Ray assured me. Your system uploads to triple redundant cloud storage. And since you went with the premium package, you have complete remote access. You can lock doors, adjust thermostats, activate the exterior lights and alarm, even make announcements through the integrated speakers. Perfect, I said. One more question. Can she disable it? Not without the master password, which only you have. She can turn off cameras temporarily while she's there using the guest access you set up, but she can't delete footage or permanently disable anything. Next, I called Elaine. I need advice on a personal matter, I began, explaining the situation as clinically as possible. First, don't confront her yet, Elaine advised after listening carefully. Colorado is an equitable distribution state. For divorce, document everything. Who owns the lake house? It's in both our names. What about improvements? Have you documented your contributions to the property? I had. Every renovation project was meticulously photographed. Receipts. Saved hours logged, a habit from my project management days. Good, she continued. And you mentioned she's planning to do what with the property? From what I overheard, they're discussing moving in together and eventually selling it, without your knowledge or consent, which she cannot legally do. Michael, I don't normally take private divorce cases, but I'll make an exception. This is legally straightforward, but emotionally complex. You need representation that understands both aspects. After ending the call with Elaine, I sent a brief email to my project manager in Singapore, explaining that a family emergency required me to return home. Then I booked the first available flight to Denver. During the 20-hour journey, I didn't watch movies or review project notes. Instead, I formulated a plan. This wasn't about revenge. I'd seen too many bitter divorces among colleagues to believe that vengeance brought anything but prolonged pain. This was about justice, about ensuring that the life I'd built wasn't dismantled through deception. By the time the plane touched down in Denver, my path was clear. I wouldn't yell or plead or try to salvage what was obviously broken beyond repair. I would simply document, preserve, and protect what was rightfully mine in the most straightforward manner possible. I didn't tell Rebecca I was returning early. After landing, I rented a car and drove straight to our primary residence in Denver's Washington Park neighborhood. The house was empty, our cleaning lady informing me that Rebecca had mentioned spending the week at the lake house. Perfect. I packed essential documents, backed up our home computer, and collected the items of true sentimental value. My grandfather's pocket watch, photos from my time building wells in Ethiopia, the first blueprint I'd ever drawn as a student. Then I checked into a hotel downtown and messaged my friend Thomas Carter, asking to meet for coffee. Thomas had been my colleague at GreenFlow before starting his own environmental consulting firm. He was also one of the few people who knew both Rebecca and me well, having been a groomsman at our wedding. "I wondered when this conversation would happen," Thomas said, after I explained the situation at Summit Brews, our usual meeting spot. "She's been different lately, more guarded when your name comes up." "You knew?" I asked, stirring my untouched coffee. Thomas sighed. "I suspected. About 6 months ago I saw them together at the Mercantile downtown. It looked intimate. When I mentioned to Rebecca that I'd seen her, she said they were discussing a marketing strategy for his new fitness studio. I chose to believe her, but something felt off." "His new fitness studio," I repeated. "Tell me about that." "Jason's opening some high-end wellness center, integrated fitness experiences, or some buzzword salad like that. Rebecca's agency is apparently handling the branding." The pieces clicked into place. Rebecca's marketing agency worked exclusively with established businesses, not startups. She'd been investing time, and possibly our money, into Jason's new venture. "One more question," I said. "Has Rebecca mentioned anything about the lake house? Plans to sell, perhaps?" Thomas looked uncomfortable. "She asked me about property values in Grand Lake last month, said you two were considering leveraging the asset, given how the mountain property market has exploded. I assumed it was a joint decision." I nodded, adding this information to my mental file. "Thanks for being honest. I've got some decisions to make." Looking back, I realize now that our relationship had been unraveling thread by thread for years before I noticed the fraying edges. The lake house had been my attempt to weave us back together, to create a tangible symbol of our shared future. But while I'd been focusing on building the physical structure, the emotional foundation had been crumbling beneath us. Rebecca and I met during what I now recognize as the most optimistic period of my career. I'd just completed my first major international project, a drought-resistant irrigation system in northern Kenya that had transformed a struggling farming community. The work had been featured in several engineering publications, and GreenFlow had promoted me to lead engineer. As a result, I felt invincible, certain that with enough intelligence and determination, any problem could be solved. Rebecca seemed to embody that same optimistic energy. Her marketing career was taking off, her client list growing. We'd talk for hours about our ambitions, our vision for changing our respective industries. We dreamed of combining our skills. Someday, perhaps a foundation that would bring sustainable water solutions to communities in need, with Rebecca handling the awareness campaigns and fundraising. Our wedding was modest but meaningful. Neither of us wanted to start our life together with unnecessary debt. We honeymooned in Costa Rica, splitting our time between volunteering at a water purification project and relaxing on pristine beaches. Even our leisure time had purpose, intention. The first 5 years passed in a whirlwind of career advancement. I took on increasingly complex international assignments. Rebecca built her reputation in the marketing world, eventually becoming a partner at her agency. We bought a comfortable but not extravagant home in Denver's Washington Park neighborhood. We discussed children, but decided to wait. Our careers were demanding, and we wanted to be financially secure first. Looking back, I can see how our priorities shifted almost imperceptibly. The volunteer trips became less frequent, replaced by luxury vacations we felt we'd earned. Our discussions about starting a foundation faded, overtaken by conversations about investment properties and retirement accounts. We were successful by conventional standards, but something essential was slipping away. The lake house was supposed to be a return to our roots, a place where we could reconnect with each other and the values that had brought us together. I remember the day we found it, a spring afternoon with wildflowers blooming along the mountain roads. The property needed work, but the setting was spectacular, with the lake stretching before us and mountains rising beyond like guardians of some sacred place. "This is it," Rebecca had whispered, squeezing my hand as we stood on the weathered deck. "This is where we remember who we really are." I'd believed her. We made an offer that day, stretching our finances to the limit. I saw the project as an investment in our marriage, a commitment to building something lasting together. Every improvement I made to the property, reinforcing the foundation, replacing the roof, rebuilding the dock, felt like a metaphor for strengthening our relationship. But even as I poured sweat and savings into the lake house, our time there together grew increasingly rare. My international assignments continued to demand weeks away. Rebecca's agency took on larger clients requiring weekend work and evening events. When we did manage to coordinate time at Grand Lake, Rebecca spent much of it on her laptop or phone, claiming client emergencies that couldn't wait. The first concrete warning sign appeared 3 years ago, after I returned from a particularly difficult 6-week assignment in Bolivia. I'd been building water purification systems in a remote village with limited communication capabilities. When I finally returned home, exhausted but proud of the work we'd accomplished, Rebecca greeted me with unexpected news. "I've accepted a position on the Denver Arts Council," she announced over dinner our first night back together. "It's a tremendous honor. They rarely select anyone under 50. "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely happy for her. "When did this happen?" "The board voted last week. The previous member resigned unexpectedly for health reasons, and they needed someone quickly. My first meeting is tomorrow evening." "Tomorrow?" "I've been hoping for a weekend at the lake house, time to reconnect after my long absence. It couldn't be postponed," she explained. "We're finalizing the annual budget." I accepted the explanation, pushing aside my disappointment. This was important to her career, to her place in the Denver community. My desire for reconnection could wait, except it was always waiting. The Arts Council meetings led to fundraising galas, that led to committee appointments, that led to networking events. Our calendars became a complex negotiation with fewer overlapping free spaces. When Rebecca announced her wellness journey 18 months ago, I initially saw it as a positive development. She'd been working intensely, often skipping meals and exercise in favor of client meetings. A renewed focus on health seemed like a necessary correction. "I've signed up with a personal trainer," she told me one evening. "His name is Jason. He specializes in holistic fitness, not just exercise, but nutrition, stress management, the whole package." "Sounds perfect," I encouraged. "You've seemed tired lately." "He's already made a huge difference," she continued enthusiastically. "He says my core strength is exceptional for someone who's been sedentary so long." I didn't point out that Rebecca had never been particularly sedentary. We'd hiked regularly in our early years, and she'd maintained a yoga practice for most of our marriage. But I was glad to see her excited about something beyond work. The training sessions started at 3 days a week, then increased to 5. Weekend wellness retreats appeared on our shared calendar. Intensive workshops on nutrition, meditation, outdoor fitness. I never questioned these, assuming they were group events organized by the gym or Jason's wellness practice. When I suggested joining one of these retreats, I was home for a rare 3-week stretch and thought it might be something we could experience together. Rebecca's response was oddly defensive. "These are really designed for people already in the program," she explained. "You'd be starting from zero while everyone else is advanced. It wouldn't be enjoyable for you." I accepted her explanation, focusing instead on the lake house renovations I'd planned for that weekend. The property was becoming my primary connection to Rebecca, a place I improved for our future, even as that future grew increasingly nebulous. Financial warning signs emerged gradually. Rebecca had always maintained some separate accounts, a practice I supported in principle. Financial independence was important to her identity, and I respected that. But our agreement had always been transparency about major expenditures and joint decision-making for anything over $5,000. About a year ago, I noticed unusual patterns in our joint credit card statements. Charges at high-end restaurants on evenings when Rebecca had claimed to be working late, weekend hotel charges in Aspen and Vale during supposed wellness retreats, expensive gifts from boutiques that seemed unlikely to be for business contacts, a men's watch worth $2,800, designer sunglasses, high-end athletic wear in sizes that weren't Rebecca's. When I casually mentioned the watch purchase, suggesting it seemed expensive for a business gift, Rebecca's explanation came too quickly. "It's for Martin Wheeler. You remember, the tech CEO who's our biggest client? His company just went public, and the partners decided he deserved something special. We all contributed." The explanation was plausible, but something in her tone felt rehearsed. I didn't press further, but I began paying closer attention to our finances. 2 substantial transfers from our joint investment account caught my attention. $45,000 in March, another $82,000 in June. When I asked about them, Rebecca explained they were for a special investment opportunity through her agency. Something about early shares in a promising startup their marketing team had identified. "The partners are all investing," she assured me. "It's practically guaranteed to double within 18 months. I requested documentation, prospectus, materials, anything that would explain such a significant investment. Rebecca promised to provide them, but never did. Each time I brought it up, she had a reason the materials weren't available yet: legal reviews, confidentiality concerns, timing, issues. Eventually, I stopped asking, not wanting to appear untrusting. That was perhaps my greatest failure, choosing temporary harmony over necessary confrontation. I'd seen marriages among my colleagues disintegrate through suspicion and accusation. I'd watched friends become bitter, defensive people during contentious divorces. I didn't want that for us. So I observed, noted patterns, but avoided the difficult conversations that might have brought issues to light sooner. Instead, I channeled my energies into the lake house. Each improvement felt like an investment in our future, a demonstration of my commitment. The security system had been my latest project, ostensibly for practical reasons, as the property remained unoccupied for weeks at a time. But subconsciously, perhaps I'd already sensed a need to monitor what happened in my absence. The system I chose was comprehensive. Motion-activated cameras in every room, door and window sensors, smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, all connected to a central hub that communicated with an app on my phone. Ray Martinez, a security consultant, who'd previously worked with GreenFlow on international projects, had installed it personally during my last visit home. "This is serious equipment," Ray had commented during installation. "Military-grade encryption, cloud backup, the works. You expecting trouble up here?" Just being cautious, I'd replied. We've had a few break-ins reported around the lake. Henri, that wasn't entirely false. There had been some incidents at vacation properties during the off-season. But my motivation went deeper. Something in my engineering mind needed to solve the puzzle of our increasingly distant relationship. Data, evidence, patterns. These were the tools I understood. Perhaps they could illuminate what words and emotions had failed to reveal. I showed Rebecca the basics of the system before leaving for Singapore, how to disarm it upon arrival, how to temporarily disable interior cameras for privacy, how to contact emergency services through the app if needed. What I didn't explain was the master access level that only I possessed, allowing me to override any temporary disabling of the system, or the cloud storage that maintained footage regardless of local settings. These omissions weren't planned deceptions. At the time, they simply seemed like technical details she wouldn't care about. Rebecca had always deferred to me on technical stuff, just as I deferred to her on matters of design and social networking. Our division of expertise had been efficient, comfortable. Only now did I realize how those divisions had created separate worlds, separate knowledge bases that no longer overlapped as they once had. We had become specialists in our marriage, rather than partners, each assuming the other's domain was functioning properly without verification. The night before her video call, the call that would change everything, I'd received an automated alert from the security system, motion detected in multiple rooms at the lake house. I'd checked briefly, seen Rebecca moving through the living room, and assumed she'd decided to spend the weekend there. She'd mentioned needing creative space for a new client pitch. I'd sent a quick text. Saw you're at the lake. Hope it's peaceful. Love you. Her response had been equally brief. Just needed some quiet time to think. Talk tomorrow. Nothing in that exchange had prepared me for what tomorrow would bring. The casual announcement of our marriage's end, delivered as if reporting a minor schedule change. After booking my flight home from Singapore, I spent the remainder of the night reviewing security footage from the previous 2 days. The evidence was both overwhelming and heartbreaking. Rebecca and Jason hadn't just started an affair. They were planning a future together. Their conversations, captured with crystal clarity by my state-of-the-art system, revealed a relationship that had clearly developed over months. Once the divorce is final, we can use some of the lake house money to secure better financing for the wellness center. Rebecca had told Jason as they sat on my custom-built deck furniture, sharing a bottle of wine I'd brought back from a project in Argentina. Michael won't fight it. He hates confrontation. He'll just want everything to be over quickly. Jason had seemed less certain. These types can surprise you. The quiet ones sometimes turn vicious when cornered. Rebecca had laughed at that. A sound I once loved now twisted into something unrecognizable. Trust me, I know how to handle him. 15 years of marriage teaches you exactly which buttons to push. A little guilt here, a little flattery there. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him. Their casual dissection of my personality, their confidence in my malleability, struck deeper than the physical betrayal. The Rebecca on my screen was a stranger wearing my wife's face, speaking with my wife's voice, but unrecognizable in her calculated coldness. Even more disturbing were their plans for the lake house itself. They walked through each room, discussing renovations as if the property were already theirs. The custom shelving I'd built in the living room would be torn out for a meditation space. The kitchen I'd painstakingly modernized would be gutted again for something more contemporary. The boathouse I'd rebuilt last summer would become a private wellness cabana for Jason's one-on-one client sessions. They spoke of clearing the energy of the space, of removing all traces of Michael, as if I was some lingering, unpleasant odor, rather than the person who had created much of what they were so casually planning to destroy. What struck me most, reviewing hours of footage on my laptop in that Singapore hotel room, wasn't anger, but a profound sense of waste. All the effort, care, and attention I'd poured into our relationship and our shared property, dismissed as outdated, inconvenient, easily replaced. 15 years of partnership reduced to assets to be liquidated for their new venture. By morning, I had compiled and saved key segments of footage, organized by date and relevance. Some demonstrated the affair itself, painful but ultimately not critical to legal proceedings in a no-fault state like Colorado. Others documented their explicit plans to sell jointly owned property without my consent, legally actionable material. I sent these selected clips to Ray with instructions to secure them offline as well as in the cloud. Then I contacted Elaine Wong, beginning the process that would protect what was legitimately mine from being appropriated for their fresh start. As my flight from Singapore crossed the international date line, I found myself in the strange position of traveling backward in time while my mind raced forward, planning each necessary step. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my career designing systems that would function flawlessly in my absence, and now my marriage had catastrophically failed while I was halfway around the world. Perhaps that was the fundamental flaw in my approach to our relationship. I treated it as another engineering problem, something that could be solved with the right design, appropriate maintenance, occasional upgrades. I'd missed the essential human element, the need for consistent presence, for attunement, for the kind of attention that can't be automated or scheduled. Yet even as I acknowledged my own role in our disconnection, I couldn't accept the deliberate deception Rebecca had orchestrated. Whatever failures had occurred in our marriage, they didn't justify the calculated financial scheme she and Jason were attempting. They didn't explain the callous disregard for 15 years of shared history, the casual cruelty of her announcement, the laughter in her voice as she delivered the news she must have known would devastate me. As the plane began its descent into Denver International Airport, I made a final decision. I would proceed with dignity but determination. I would protect what was rightfully mine without seeking to punish or humiliate. I would untangle our lives as cleanly as possible, preserving what mattered most to me, the lake house that represented not just financial investment, but countless hours of physical labor and creative energy. Rebecca had fundamentally misread me. I didn't hate confrontation. I simply preferred resolution. I wasn't easily manipulated. I was deliberately considerate. And I certainly wouldn't sign whatever she put in front of me without thorough examination of every clause, every implication. She'd forgotten somehow that I made my living identifying overlooked details in complex systems, that I specialized in recognizing failure points before they became catastrophic, that my patience and methodical approach weren't weaknesses, but professional strengths. As I collected my luggage and headed toward the rental car counter, a strange calm settled over me. This wasn't the end I would have chosen for our marriage, but perhaps it was the end we needed. The truth had been revealed, not through emotional confrontation, but through the impartial lens of a security camera, fitting for a relationship that had gradually substituted technology for genuine connection. Now, it was time to face that truth directly, to handle the failure of this particular system with the same methodical care I'd apply to any professional challenge. The difference was that this time, I was both the engineer and the client. The solution would need to serve not just practical requirements, but my own long-term well-being. Outside the airport, Colorado's autumn air felt crisp and clarifying after the tropical humidity of Singapore. The mountains rose in the distance, their peaks already dusted with early snow. Somewhere among them, nestled beside a lake that reflected their majesty, was the house I had built for a future that would now take a different form than I had imagined. I would reclaim that house and that future, not out of vengeance, but out of self-respect. Whatever came next, it would be on terms that honored the work I had done and the life I had yet to live. The next morning, I met with Elaine Wong at her downtown office. She'd already reviewed the security footage I'd provided and prepared preliminary divorce papers. "We have several options," she explained, laying out documents on her polished desk. "Colorado requires equitable distribution of marital assets, not necessarily equal. Given the circumstances, her infidelity, attempts to dispose of joint property without consent, possible misuse of joint funds, we have leverage. I don't want to ruin her," I clarified. "I just want what's fair." "Fair is what we'll aim for," Elaine nodded. "But fair doesn't mean you absorb financial damage from her actions. Now, about the lake house. We have two approaches: fight for full ownership based on your substantial personal improvements and her misconduct, or force a sale and equitable distribution of proceeds." I thought about the countless weekends spent replacing rotted deck, boards, upgrading the kitchen with locally sourced granite, and installing a boathouse on the private dock. The property's value had increased significantly, partly due to the hot market, but largely because of my improvements. "I want the lake house," I decided. "It was supposed to be our forever home. It can still be mine." "Then that's what we'll fight for," Elaine confirmed. "Here's my suggested approach. Document everything, secure all financial accounts, then confront with evidence and a fair settlement offer. People facing overwhelming evidence often choose the path of least resistance." After leaving Elaine's office, I drove to my bank and spent 2 hours with a personal banker, separating our finances. I didn't empty joint accounts. That would be legally problematic. But I did ensure that my direct deposits and personal savings were secured from impulsive withdrawals. Next came the difficult but necessary step of notifying our families. I called my parents first, then my sister. I stuck to the essential facts without vilifying Rebecca. They responded with shock, then support, offering their homes if I needed a place to stay. I declined, preferring the neutral territory of my hotel while navigating these waters. I considered calling Rebecca's parents, but decided against it. That conversation belonged to her, though I did send them a brief, respectful email explaining that Rebecca and I were separating, and that while circumstances were painful, I still respected them and appreciated their role in my life. 3 days after returning to Colorado, I was ready for the confrontation. Not at our Denver house, that space felt contaminated now, but at the lake house, where the betrayal had played out in high-definition video. I drove the familiar winding mountain roads to Grand Lake on a crisp autumn morning. Golden aspen leaves shimmered against the deep green pines, and fresh snow dusted the highest peaks. Under different circumstances, I would have pulled over to photograph the scenery. Today, I drove straight through. As I approached our private road, I activated the Lake House security app on my phone. 2 heat signatures moved within the house. 1 in the kitchen, 1 in the upstairs bathroom, 2 vehicles in the driveway, Rebecca's Audi SUV and a black Jeep Wrangler I didn't recognize. Jason's, presumably. I parked behind them, blocking both vehicles in our narrow driveway. Then I used my phone to activate the exterior lights, which began flashing, a feature Ray had installed as part of the security package. Through my phone's connection to the interior cameras, I watched Rebecca rush to the window in confusion. Rather than immediately entering, I sat in my car and used the home speaker system. "Rebecca, this is Michael. I've returned from Singapore and would like to speak with both you and Jason. I'll be coming inside in 5 minutes. Please make yourselves presentable." The looks of shock on their faces, captured by my interior cameras and displayed on my phone, provided a moment of grim satisfaction. I watched them scramble, whisper fighting in the kitchen, Jason gesturing toward the back door as if suggesting escape. Rebecca shaking her head, straightening her clothes, preparing for confrontation. 5 minutes later, I unlocked the front door and stepped inside the home I had helped build. Rebecca stood in the living room, arms crossed defensively. Jason hovered near the kitchen island, trying to project confidence, but repeatedly shifting his weight. "Michael," Rebecca began, her marketing-trained voice striving for control. "You should have called before coming to my own property," I interrupted calmly. "The lake house that's jointly owned and that you were planning to sell without my knowledge or consent." "That's not," she started. "It is," I countered, opening my phone to play a clip from the security footage. Their voices filled the room, discussing renovation plans and timeline for listing the property. The color drained from Rebecca's face. Jason took a step back, bumping into a bar stool. "You've been recording us? That's invasion of privacy." Rebecca's shock transformed into outrage. "It's my security system in my home, which captured unauthorized occupants planning to illegally dispose of jointly owned property," I corrected her. "My attorney has reviewed the footage and confirms it's completely legal in Colorado." "You involved lawyers already?" Her voice rose. "We could have discussed this like adults." The irony of her statement hung in the air between us. I didn't need to point it out. "Rebecca, I didn't come here to argue. I came to inform you of what happens next." I placed a folder on the coffee table, the pine one I'd built last summer. "These are divorce papers prepared by my attorney. They offer a straightforward division of assets. You keep the Denver house and your business interests. I keep the lake house and my retirement accounts. We divide the remaining assets equally. And if I don't agree," her chin lifted defiantly, "then we proceed to a contested divorce where I'll present evidence of adultery, attempted unauthorized sale of joint property, and potential misappropriation of marital funds for Jason's new business venture. The choice is yours." Jason, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "You can't prove I've been involved in any financial—" "Actually," I interrupted, "my forensic accountant has identified $127,000 transferred from our joint investment account to Mountain Wellness LLC over the past 8 months. A company registered to you 6 months ago. Would you like to explain that?" He looked at Rebecca accusingly. She avoided his gaze. "This doesn't have to be ugly," I continued. "Sign the papers, return the funds improperly diverted to Jason's business, and we all move forward separately." "I need to speak with my own lawyer," Rebecca insisted. "Of course. You have 48 hours to provide a preliminary response. Until then, I'll be staying here at the lake house. You're both welcome to collect your personal belongings, but I'll need to be present during that process. You can't just throw me out of my own house." Rebecca's voice cracked with indignation. "I'm not throwing you out of your house. The Denver property remains yours to use. This property, given the circumstances, will remain under my physical control until our divorce is finalized. My attorney has filed the appropriate notices with the county." Rebecca turned to Jason, perhaps expecting him to challenge me. Instead, he grabbed his jacket from a nearby chair. "I'll wait in the car," he muttered to her. "This is between you two." After Jason left, Rebecca's composed facade crumbled slightly. "You've been planning this," she accused. "All those business trips, always working late. You checked out of this marriage years ago. Jason actually sees me, values me." "I won't debate perceptions, Rebecca. The facts and evidence speak for themselves." I gestured toward the door. "Take whatever personal items you need now. You can arrange for the rest later this week." She grabbed her purse and coat but paused at the door. "You know what's ironic, Michael? You built this place to bring us closer together, but you were never really here, always fixing someone else's problems halfway around the world." She left before I could respond, though I'm not sure what I would have said. Perhaps she was right. In her way, I had built systems and structures, believing they could sustain themselves with minimal maintenance. It was a professional blind spot I'd carried into my personal life. After they drove away, I walked through the house, noting changes they'd already made. Unfamiliar bedding, new artwork, a different coffee maker. Small claims already staked. I spent the evening on the deck despite the autumn chill, watching. Darkness settle over the lake, the mountains disappearing into night. The next morning, I awoke to a barrage of text messages and missed calls from Rebecca. The initial messages were angry, accusing me of orchestrating a calculated ambush and threatening immediate legal action. By midday, the tone shifted to negotiation, suggesting we discuss terms without involving attorneys who'll just drain our resources. I replied to none of them, following Elaine's advice to channel all communication through proper legal channels. Instead, I spent the day documenting the house's current condition, photographing each room, noting any changes or damages that had occurred during Rebecca and Jason's occupation. In the master bathroom, I found evidence they'd already begun implementing their renovation plans. The antique bronze fixtures I'd installed, selected to match the mountain aesthetic, had been removed and replaced with modern chrome pieces. The custom vanity I'd built from reclaimed barnwood had been partially dismantled, components stacked carelessly in the adjoining closet. It wasn't just the unauthorized modifications that disturbed me. It was the casual disregard for the craftsmanship, for the hours of work each element had required. The fixtures hadn't simply been replaced, they'd been removed roughly, leaving gouges in the hand-plastered walls. The vanity hadn't been carefully disassembled, it had been pried apart, splintering. The joinery I'd spent weeks perfecting. This destruction felt more personal than the affair itself, a direct attack on something I'd created with care and attention. I photographed each instance meticulously, adding them to the growing file of evidence. By late afternoon, a certified letter arrived from Rebecca's hastily retained attorney, demanding immediate access to the property and challenging my right to exclude her. I forwarded it to Elaine, who responded with professional efficiency, countering with our evidence of attempted, unauthorized sale and property damage. Their posturing, Elaine assured me during our evening call. Her attorney knows they're on shaky ground legally. The footage of them planning to sell without your consent is damning. The unauthorized renovations and documented damage strengthen our position further. What's our next move? I asked, watching the sunset reflect off the lake's still surface. We wait, Elaine replied. Let them process the reality of their situation. Either they'll come to the table with a reasonable response to our settlement offer, or they'll escalate to court proceedings where our evidence will speak for itself. That night, as I was preparing for bed, a notification appeared on my phone. Motion detected at the front door. I checked the security feed to see Jason standing on the porch, alone, shifting uncomfortably from foot to foot. After a moment's hesitation, I activated the intercom. It's almost midnight, Jason. What do you want? He looked up, startled by my voice from the hidden speaker. I need to talk to you. 5 minutes, that's all. Against my better judgment, I went downstairs and opened the door, keeping the security chain engaged. 5 minutes, I confirmed. Look, he began, voice lower than during our earlier confrontation. This situation is getting complicated. Rebecca's lawyer is talking about restraining orders, property damage claims, all kinds of messy stuff. That would be inadvisable given the evidence we have, I replied evenly. That's what I'm trying to tell you, he continued, glancing nervously over his shoulder toward the driveway where his Jeep idled. She's not thinking clearly. She's talking about coming back here tomorrow with a locksmith, claiming you changed the locks illegally. I haven't changed any locks, I corrected him, and she's welcome to return with proper notice while I'm present, as I stated earlier. Man, you're not getting it, Jason said, frustration evident. She's going to make this ugly, really ugly. Claims about emotional abuse, abandonment, whatever it takes. I studied him carefully, trying to discern his motivation. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't need this level of drama, he admitted. My business is about to launch. I can't have my name dragged through some public legal battle, especially not in a small community like Grand Lake. That's unfortunate timing, I observed, unmoved. Perhaps you should have considered that before getting involved with a married woman and attempting to sell property that doesn't belong to you. He ran a hand through his hair, visibly agitated. Look, I'm trying to help you. Rebecca's gone. Full scorched earth. She's talking about selling off stuff from your Denver house before you can stop her. Family heirlooms, collectibles, whatever she can liquidate quickly. This was new information. Potentially valuable, potentially manipulative. Again, why tell me this? Because I want out of this situation with minimal damage, he said bluntly. I didn't know about the financial stuff, the transfers from your joint account. She told me that was her money, that you'd agreed she could invest in my business. And you believed that without any documentation, without meeting me or confirming this substantial investment was approved by both parties. He looked away, the answer evident in his discomfort. Your 5 minutes are up, Jason, I said, preparing to close the door. If you have relevant information about potential theft or destruction of property, I suggest you document it properly and provide it to my attorney. Wait, he said quickly, there's more. The lake house sale, it wasn't going to be to some random buyer. It was going to Jason Mills Sr., my father. The plan was for him to buy it at below market value, then gift it to me after your divorce was finalized. A way to keep the property in friendly hands without raising suspicions. This admission confirmed what I'd suspected. The planned sale wasn't just about liquidating an asset. It was a deliberate scheme to transfer the property to Jason at a reduced price. Another layer of deception, another confirmation that my marriage had been systematically undermined. Thank you for your honesty, I said, my voice steady despite the churning in my stomach. I'll pass this information to my attorney. I suggest you do the same with yours. I don't have an attorney, he admitted. I can't afford one right now. All my capital is tied up in the business launch. Then I suggest you reconsider your business partnership as well as your personal one, I replied, closing the door before he could respond. I immediately called Elaine despite the late hour, relaying the conversation verbatim while it was fresh in my mind. She listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. This is useful information, she confirmed when I'd finished. It suggests discord between Rebecca and Jason, which we can potentially leverage. It also provides additional evidence of a coordinated plan to deprive you of your property interest. Could it be a setup? I asked. Jason working with Rebecca to gather information or record our conversation? Possible but unlikely, Elaine assessed. The admission about the planned sale to his father is particularly damaging, not something they'd want on record if they were trying to strengthen their position. What about the threats to sell off items from the Denver house? I'll file an emergency motion in the morning to prevent disposition of marital assets pending divorce proceedings, she assured me. In the meantime, is there anything irreplaceable still at the Denver property that you haven't secured? I mentally inventoried what remained there, furniture we'd collected over the years, kitchen equipment, books, clothing. Nothing irreplaceable, nothing that couldn't be documented and compensated for if necessary. No, I answered. I secured the truly important items when I first returned. Good, Elaine said, the approval evident in her voice. You're handling this methodically, which is exactly what the situation requires. Get some rest. Tomorrow may bring new developments. The next day passed without direct contact from Rebecca, though her attorney sent a formal response rejecting our initial settlement proposal and countering with terms that would give her half the value of the lake house while retaining full ownership of the Denver property. It was an opening position so unreasonable that Elaine actually laughed when I forwarded it. Classic negotiation tactic, she explained. Start with an absurd position so the eventual compromise still favors you substantially. we'll respond by holding firm on our original offer, which we know is actually fair. While the legal communications proceeded through proper channels, I continued my documentation efforts at the lake house, discovering additional evidence of Rebecca and Jason's plans. In a desk drawer, I found sketched floor plans for the mountain wellness retreat they envisioned creating from my renovated home. The bathrooms I'd updated would become hydration stations. The library, where I'd installed custom shelving, would transform into a mindfulness center. The boathouse would serve as a private massage studio. The comprehensive nature of their plans suggested months of preparation, of systematic deception while I traveled for work, believing my marriage was merely experiencing temporary strains easily attributed to busy schedules and career demands. That evening, I received an unexpected call from Rebecca's mother, Margaret. Our relationship had always been cordial, if not particularly close. She'd initially been skeptical of my international career and its impact on her daughter's life. "Michael," she began, without preamble when I answered, "I need to understand what's happening. Rebecca is telling us one version, but it doesn't align with the man we've known for 12 years. I hesitated, not wanting to drag her into the painful details or speak ill of her daughter. "Margaret, I appreciate your call, but this is a complex situation that's best resolved between Rebecca and me with the help of our attorneys. She says you installed spy cameras and are trying to take everything from her," Margaret continued, her voice strained. "That doesn't sound like you." "I installed a security system to protect our property, which is standard for vacation homes that sit empty for extended periods," I explained carefully. "As for the divorce terms, I'm seeking an equitable division that reflects our respective contributions and current circumstances." There was a pause before Margaret spoke again, her voice quieter. "She's not been herself lately, Michael. Richard and I have noticed changes over the past year or so, more secretive, less inclined to visit or include us in her life. Is there someone else involved?" The question hung between us, painful in its directness. I chose my words with care, respecting both her right to some understanding and my own determination to avoid unnecessary cruelty. "Margaret, there are aspects of this situation that would be inappropriate for me to discuss. What I can tell you is that I discovered information that made it clear our marriage couldn't continue, and I'm proceeding in the most straightforward manner possible under the circumstances." "I see," she said quietly. "You've always been a good man, Michael. Whatever's happened, I hope you know that Richard and I value the years you've been part of our family." Her words touched me unexpectedly, a reminder of the broader web of relationships affected by our marriage's dissolution. "Thank you, Margaret. That means a great deal to me." After we said our goodbyes, I sat on the deck, watching evening light play across the mountains, reflecting on the ripple effects of betrayal. It wasn't just Rebecca and me being affected. It was her parents losing a son-in-law, my parents losing a daughter-in-law, our friends being forced to navigate divided loyalties. I was startled from these thoughts by the security system alert, motion at the driveway entrance. Checking the camera, I saw Rebecca's Audi approaching, alone this time. I considered denying entry, but decided a controlled conversation might actually be productive at this point. I activated the gate opener, allowing her vehicle to proceed up the driveway. Through the interior cameras, I watched as she parked and sat in her car for several minutes, seemingly gathering herself before approaching the house. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath and opened it, maintaining a neutral expression despite the surge of emotions her presence triggered. "Rebecca," I acknowledged with a nod. "I didn't expect to see you today." "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "I think we should talk directly, not just through lawyers." I hesitated, then stepped aside. "We can talk in the living room." She entered, glancing around as if seeing the space for the first time. Perhaps she was, in a way, seeing it not as our shared home, but as contested territory in an increasingly complex negotiation. "You've removed Jason's things," she observed, noticing the absence of his workout equipment that had been stationed near the fireplace. "I've placed all items that don't belong to either of us in the garage," I explained. "They can be collected at any time." She nodded, taking a seat on the sofa, the one she'd laughed about replacing in the security footage. I remained standing, maintaining both physical and emotional distance. "Your lawyer's offer is unreasonable," she began, shifting into the direct approach that had served her well in marketing negotiations. "It's actually quite fair given the circumstances," I countered. "You retain the Denver house, which is closer to your work and social connections. I retain the lake house, which I've invested thousands of hours in improving. We each keep our respective retirement accounts, and you return the funds improperly diverted to Jason's business venture." "I didn't divert funds," she protested. "Those were investments we discussed. We discussed potential investments in established companies, not funding your lover's startup," I corrected her. "And certainly not without proper documentation or my explicit consent for amounts exceeding our agreed threshold." Her eyes narrowed at the word lover, but she didn't deny it. "Jason's business is a legitimate investment opportunity. The e-wellness industry is booming. Then it should have no trouble attracting proper investors through proper channels," I replied. "Not misappropriated marital funds." She sighed, changing tactics. "Michael, we were growing apart long before Jason. You know that, all those trips, all those months apart, what did you expect would happen?" "I expected communication," I said simply. "If you were unhappy, if you wanted changes, if you were considering ending our marriage, those are conversations partners. What I didn't expect was deception, unauthorized financial transfers, and attempts to sell jointly owned property behind my back." Her expression flickered, surprise briefly visible before she masked it. "Who told you about—" "It doesn't matter," I interrupted. "What matters is that it's documented, along with the planning calls you made to realtors while I was in Singapore. This was a calculated bluff. I had no recordings of realtor calls, but the security footage had captured her mentioning such calls to Jason. Her reaction confirmed they had occurred. "You've been monitoring everything," she said, anger replacing her negotiating facade, "all this time, pretending to be the trusting husband while spying on me." "The security system was installed 4 weeks ago, Rebecca," I corrected her. "Hardly all this time. And it was installed with your knowledge and consent for the legitimate purpose of protecting our property." She stood abruptly, pacing toward the fireplace. "This isn't about the house or the money, is it? This is about control. You can't stand that I made a decision without consulting your precious spreadsheets and risk assessments." "This is about respect," I countered, keeping my voice level despite her escalating tone. "Respect for our history, for our legal obligations to each other, for basic honesty in a partnership. Something that's been notably absent from your recent actions." She turned, eyes flashing. "You want to talk about honesty? Let's talk about how you've been using your career to escape this marriage for years. All those emergency assignments in remote locations, all those extended trips that could have been handled by other engineers. You were physically present but emotionally checked out long before Jason entered the picture." Her accusation struck a nerve, not because it was entirely accurate, but because it contained enough truth to sting. I had prioritized my career, had accepted assignments that kept me away for weeks or months at a time, not to escape, as she claimed, but because the work mattered. because I was making a difference in communities that desperately needed sustainable water solutions. But I'd failed to make her feel that same sense of purpose, failed to fully include her in that aspect of my life as the years passed. The distance had grown gradually, both literal and figurative, until perhaps it seemed insurmountable from her perspective. "You may be right that I prioritize my work too often," I acknowledged, surprising her with my concession. "That's something I'll reflect on moving forward." But your response to that disconnection was not to address it directly, but to pursue deception on multiple levels. Those are choices you made, Rebecca, choices with consequences. She seemed momentarily disarmed by my partial agreement, the righteous anger deflating slightly. "So what now?" she asked, her voice quieter. "We just let the lawyers drain our accounts, fighting over assets neither of us will enjoy?" "No," I replied. "We accept the reality of our situation and proceed with dignity. The settlement offer on the table is fair. It allows us both to move forward without prolonged legal battles. I suggest you consider it carefully." She was silent for a long moment, looking around the room at the space we'd once shared, at the life we'd once planned. "I did love you, Michael," she said finally. "Maybe not at the end, but for many years I truly did." "I believe that," I said softly. "And I loved you, which makes the current situation all the more painful." She nodded, gathering her purse from where she'd placed it on the coffee table. "I'll discuss your offer with my attorney again," she said, moving toward the door. "Perhaps there's room for compromise." "I hope so," I replied, following her to the entrance. "For both our sakes." As she reached for the door handle, she paused, turning partially toward me, but not quite meeting my eyes. "I'm sorry it ended this way," she said. "Whatever you believe about my actions, I never wanted to hurt you." I didn't respond immediately, weighing the sincerity of her statement against the evidence of calculated decisions that had indeed caused significant harm. "Intentions and outcomes don't always align," I said finally, something I've learned repeatedly in my work. After she left, I stood in the doorway watching her car disappear down the winding driveway, a strange hollowness settling in my chest. Despite the anger, despite the betrayal, there was still loss to be processed. The loss of the future we'd planned, the partnership we'd built, the trust that had once seemed unshakable. As darkness fell over the lake, I realized this confrontation had offered something unexpected: clarity. Not just about the facts of our situation, but about my own path forward. Whatever happened with the legal proceedings, whatever division of assets was eventually finalized, I knew with certainty that I would rebuild not just the physical spaces disrupted by betrayal, but the internal landscape of trust and purpose that had been equally damaged. The security system that had revealed the truth of my marriage had performed its function perfectly. Now it was time to develop new systems, new safeguards, not against others' deception, but against my own tendencies to prioritize work over connection, precision over presence, structures over the relationships they were meant to support. 2 days later, Rebecca's lawyer contacted Elaine. They wanted to negotiate rather than proceed to court. Smart decision. The evidence was overwhelming, and Colorado judges typically didn't look kindly on attempts to dispose of marital assets without consent. I spent those 2 days methodically documenting everything in the lake house, every renovation I had completed, every piece of furniture, every item with sentimental value. I took photographs, located receipts, and created a detailed inventory that clearly delineated what belonged to me personally versus what constituted marital property. During this process, I discovered additional evidence of Rebecca's plans. In the desk drawer of what she'd been using as her makeshift office, I found sketches for the mountain wellness retreat they planned to create from our lake house. The master bedroom would become a rejuvenation suite, The garage I'd expanded to include a workshop would be converted to a movement studio. The dock and boathouse I'd rebuilt by hand would serve as a meditation platform and aquatic therapy center. The comprehensive nature of these plans, complete with timeline, budget projections, and marketing concepts, suggested months of preparation. This wasn't an impulsive affair. It was a calculated business venture built on the foundation of our marriage's dissolution. I added these documents to the growing file of evidence, feeling a strange detachment as I did so. The betrayal still stung, but documenting it systematically transformed emotional wounds into objective facts, something I could address without being consumed by it. The negotiations took 3 weeks. Rebecca fought hardest over the lake house, claiming emotional attachment despite the evidence showing her plans to fundamentally alter it. Her attorney attempted various arguments that my frequent absences constituted a form of abandonment, that her marketing expertise had contributed significantly to the property's increased value, that her sweat equity in decorating and furnishing deserved recognition. Elaine methodically dismantled each argument with documented evidence. My absences were work-related and had financially benefited the marriage. The property's value increase stemmed primarily from my physical renovations, all meticulously documented with before and after photographs, receipts for materials, and logs of labor hours. As for Rebecca's contributions to furnishing and decorating, Elaine presented an itemized accounting of those elements, offering fair compensation for any items Rebecca wished to retain. "They're feeling desperate," Elaine informed me during one of our daily calls. Her attorney requested a private conversation with me today, never a good sign for their position. "What did they propose?" I asked, standing on the deck of the lake house, watching an osprey circle above the water. "A modified version of our original offer," Elaine explained. "Rebecca keeps the Denver house and returns 70% of the funds diverted to Jason's venture. She relinquishes all claims to the lake house, but wants a 10% share of any future sale proceeds if you decide to sell within the next 5 years. I considered this carefully. The 10% clause felt like Rebecca's attempt to save face to avoid a complete capitulation. Given the evidence we held, we could likely secure a complete victory in court, but that would mean months of additional legal proceedings, significant expense, and extended emotional strain. "What's your advice?" I asked Elaine. "From a purely legal standpoint, we could push for more," she admitted, "but litigation is unpredictable and draining, emotionally and financially. This offer achieves your primary objectives while providing a clean, relatively swift resolution." I thought about the prospect of moving forward, of rebuilding my life without the shadow of ongoing legal battles. "Let's accept the 10% clause, but with a condition. It expires after 5 years, and it applies only if I sell voluntarily, not in cases of financial hardship or career relocation." "A reasonable counter," Elaine agreed. "I'll draft the response immediately." Rebecca's team accepted our counteroffer the following day. The documents were prepared, and a signing meeting was scheduled for the following week. The process was moving toward resolution more quickly than I had anticipated, creating a strange sense of both relief and disorientation. For months, I had been operating in crisis mode, responding to betrayal with strategic planning. Now, with the end in sight, I found myself contemplating the void that would follow. The day before our scheduled signing meeting, I received an unexpected call from Jason. I nearly declined it, but decided any information might still prove useful. "Michael," he began awkwardly when I answered, "I want to check if you're still planning to attend tomorrow's meeting." "Of course," I replied, puzzled by the question. Why wouldn't I be? There was a pause before he continued. "Rebecca's been saying things. claiming she's going to bring new evidence that will change everything. I thought you should know." "What kind of evidence?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral despite the sudden tension in my shoulders. She wouldn't. "Don't tell me specifically," Jason said, his voice lowered as if he feared being overheard. "But she mentioned something about proving you've been hiding assets offshore, setting up accounts during your international trips." I almost laughed at the absurdity of this claim. "That's completely false." "I figured," Jason replied. "But she seems convinced, or at least determined to convince her lawyer. Things between us have been strained since your confrontation. I think she blames me for her position weakening." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked directly. Another pause, longer this time. "Because I'm cutting ties with her after tomorrow," he finally admitted. "The business launch is delayed indefinitely. Investors backed out when they caught wind of the legal complications. I'm moving back to Michigan next month, wanted a clean slate." "I see," I said, processing this unexpected development. "Well, thank you for the information." "One more thing," Jason added quickly. "She mentioned something about the security system, that she found evidence you've been accessing it longer than you claimed. Something about earlier footage." This was concerning. The system had only been installed 4 weeks before my Singapore trip, but Rebecca's accusation suggested she was preparing to question the timeline, perhaps to cast doubt on the legitimacy of the evidence we'd presented. After ending the call with Jason, I immediately contacted Ray Martinez, the security consultant, who had installed the system. "Ray, I need confirmation of the exact installation date and initial access records for the Lake House security system," I explained after briefly summarizing Jason's warning. "No problem," Ray replied efficiently. "I keep detailed logs of all installations. The system was activated on September 8th at 3:42 p.m. I have the signed work order with Rebecca's signature acknowledging installation, plus the initial test footage that shows both of you learning how to operate it. Can you send me those records immediately and be prepared to provide sworn testimony if necessary?" "Already compiling everything," Ray assured me. "I'll have it to you within the hour." Next I called Elaine, who responded with characteristic calm to this potential new complication. "This sounds like a desperate last-minute attempt to derail the settlement," she assessed. "If Rebecca is planning to make false claims about hidden assets or manipulated evidence, she's venturing into dangerous territory, potential perjury, if she pursues these claims formally." "Should we confront this preemptively at tomorrow's meeting?" I asked. "Let's come prepared but not lead with it," Elaine advised. "If she introduces these claims, we'll address them with documentation. If not, we proceed as planned with the settlement signing." The next morning, I arrived at Elaine's office 30 minutes early, reviewing our counter-evidence and preparing mentally for what might be a more contentious meeting than anticipated. Ray had provided comprehensive documentation of the security system installation, including time-stamped photographs and the signed work order with Rebecca's acknowledgement. We also had my complete financial records, demonstrating that no offshore accounts existed. Rebecca and her attorney arrived precisely on time. She wore a navy suit I hadn't seen before, her expression carefully neutral as she took a seat across the conference table. Her attorney, a silver-haired man named Lawrence Dempsey, placed an expandable folder on the table with deliberate emphasis, as if its contents were particularly significant. "Before we proceed with the signing," Dempsey began formally, "my client wishes to address some concerns that have recently come to light." Elaine's expression remained impassive. "We're here to execute the settlement agreement all parties have approved. If Mrs. Anderson has new concerns, they should have been raised during negotiations. These matters warrant immediate attention," Dempsey insisted, opening his folder. "We have reason to believe certain evidence presented during negotiations may have been compromised." That's a serious allegation, Elaine replied coolly. What specifically are you suggesting? Dempsey withdrew several papers from his folder. We have information indicating that the security system Mr. Anderson used to gather evidence was installed significantly earlier than claimed and may have been used for unauthorized surveillance prior to the legitimate installation date. As promised, Elaine didn't immediately present our counter-evidence. Instead, she asked calmly, "What information would that be?" Dempsey slid a document across the table, a credit card statement showing a charge from Advanced Security Systems, dated 3 months before the actual installation. This suggests Mr. Anderson was planning this surveillance operation well in advance of the claimed installation date. I glanced at the document and immediately recognized what it showed. Before selecting Ray's company for the installation, I had purchased a basic motion detection camera from a retail security company, a temporary measure until the comprehensive system could be installed. I had mentioned this purchase to Rebecca at the time, explaining it was for basic protection while the house sat empty. Elaine examined the document briefly before responding. This charge represents a preliminary purchase of a single motion detection camera from a retail provider, a fact Mr. Anderson disclosed to Mrs. Anderson at the time. It has no connection to the professional system installed by Martinez Security on September 8th, as documented here. She presented Ray's installation records, including the work order with Rebecca's signature acknowledging the installation date. The evidence was irrefutable. The system that had captured the damning footage was exactly as we had represented it. Dempsey examined our documentation, his expression souring as he realized the weakness of their position. He leaned over to confer quietly with Rebecca, whose composure was beginning to crack, her carefully neutral expression giving way to visible frustration. "There's also the matter of undisclosed financial assets," Dempsey continued, though with noticeably less conviction. "We have information suggesting Mr. Anderson may have established accounts in Singapore and possibly other international locations." What information would that be?" Elaine asked again, using the same measured tone. This time Dempsey produced a printed email that appeared to reference an account opening. "This communication references an account established during your recent visit. It was sent to Mr. Anderson's personal email. I recognized the email immediately. It was from GreenFlow's Human Resources Department, confirming the establishment of a dedicated expense account for the Singapore project. A standard procedure for extended international assignments, fully documented in my employment records and completely unrelated to personal finances." Elaine explained this calmly, then presented my complete financial disclosures, which had been independently verified during the discovery process. "As you can see, all accounts have been properly disclosed. The email refers to a corporate expense account established through Mr. Anderson's employer, a fact that could have been easily clarified had this concern been raised during our extensive negotiations." The meeting continued in this pattern. For nearly an hour, Dempsey presenting increasingly tenuous claims, Elaine systematically dismantling each one with documented evidence. Throughout this exchange, Rebecca remained largely silent, her initial confidence visibly eroding as each allegation proved unsustainable. Finally, Dempsey closed his folder with a resigned sigh. "In light of the clarifications provided, my client is prepared to proceed with the settlement as previously agreed. The signing process itself was anticlimactic. Pages turned, initials and signatures applied, notarizations completed. The legal machinery that would officially end our 12-year marriage operated with efficient indifference to the human emotions involved. As we concluded, Rebecca finally spoke directly to me for the first time during the meeting. "I still think you planned this," she said quietly. "Set me up somehow." I didn't plan for our marriage to end, Rebecca, I replied evenly. I simply protected myself when I discovered it already had. She held my gaze for a moment, searching for something. Vindication, perhaps, or an admission that would justify her actions. Finding neither, she gathered her purse and stood to leave. The Denver house keys are with my attorney, I told her, maintaining a professional tone. I've removed all my personal items. The utilities remain in both our names until next week, when they'll transfer to yours exclusively. She nodded stiffly. I'll have the remaining funds transferred to the specified account by Friday. Thank you, I replied simply, and with that, our final interaction as husband and wife concluded, not with the emotional catharsis of screaming or tears, but with the mundane details of property transfer and utility accounts. 12 years reduced to logistical arrangements and financial transactions. After Rebecca and her attorney departed, Elaine offered me a rare smile. That went as well as could be expected. The settlement is signed and will be filed with the court today. Barring any unforeseen complications, your divorce should be finalized within 60 days. Thank you, I said, feeling a complex mix of relief and melancholy. For everything. You handled this admirably, Michael, she replied, gathering the signed documents. Many clients in your position would have pursued scorched earth tactics, regardless of the emotional and financial cost. Your restraint and strategic approach served you well. I nodded, appreciating her professional assessment but recognizing that the true test lay ahead. Rebuilding a life that no longer revolved around partnership, redefining success and fulfillment in the absence of shared goals and dreams. As I left Elaine's office and stepped into the bright Colorado sunshine, I felt strangely weightless, as if I'd set down a burden I hadn't fully acknowledged carrying. The divorce wasn't yet final, but the most difficult parts were behind me. The lake house was secure, the financial entanglements nearly resolved, the legal battle effectively concluded. I drove directly to the lake house, the familiar mountain roads winding through autumn splendor. The aspen trees blazed gold against the deep green pines, their leaves shimmering in the afternoon light. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to appreciate the beauty without the overlay of strategic concerns and legal preparations. Arriving at the property, I parked in the cleared area beside the house rather than the garage, a small act of reclamation, taking the space that had been mine before Rebecca and Jason's temporary occupation. Inside, I moved methodically through each room, removing the last traces of their presence, towels I didn't recognize, kitchen gadgets purchased during my absence, decorative items that reflected Rebecca's evolving taste rather than our shared aesthetic. I didn't discard these items vindictively, but set them aside carefully in boxes labeled with Rebecca's name, to be collected or disposed of according to her wishes. This wasn't about erasing her completely, but about reclaiming the space as my own, making room for whatever would come next. In the master bedroom, I stripped the unfamiliar bedding they had purchased and replaced it with my preferred linens, simple, high-quality cotton in solid earth tones, rather than the decorative patterns Rebecca had always favored. I opened windows throughout the house, allowing mountain air to circulate freely, carrying away stale energies and introducing new possibilities. That evening, I sat on the deck with a simple meal and watched the sunset paint the mountains in dramatic hues of orange and purple. A pair of eagles circled above the lake, riding thermal currents with effortless grace. In their synchronized movements, I recognized something I had been missing in my approach to relationships: the balance between independence and interconnection, between separate strength and coordinated purpose. My career had always emphasized systems, creating them, improving them, ensuring their reliability across varying conditions. I had approached marriage with the same methodical mindset, establishing routines and expectations, measuring success through stability and predictable outcomes. But human connections aren't mechanical systems. They require adaptability, spontaneity, continuous presence, and renewal. As darkness settled over the lake, I made a decision about my professional future. For years, I had accepted every international assignment offered, viewing each as an opportunity to demonstrate value, to solve increasingly complex problems in challenging environments. That commitment had built my reputation at GreenFlow, but had also created the space for my marriage to unravel in my absence. The next morning, I called my supervisor, Nathan Reeves, and requested a meeting to discuss my future with the company. We arranged to meet the following week in Denver. "I've been expecting this call," Nathan admitted when we connected. "After what you've been going through personally, I figured you might be considering options." "I'm not resigning," I clarified, "but I am requesting a change in assignment parameters." "What did you have in mind?" he asked. "I'd like to transition to a role that requires less international travel," I explained. "Perhaps focusing on North American projects or serving as a remote consultant to international teams, rather than being on site for months at a time." Nathan was quiet for a moment before responding. "You're one of our best field engineers, Michael. Your ability to adapt to challenging environments and find solutions under pressure is exceptional." "I appreciate that," I acknowledged. "But I'm recognizing the personal cost of that particular skill set. I believe I can provide significant value to GreenFlow while maintaining a more consistent home base." "Let me think about potential configurations," Nathan offered. "We have been discussing establishing regional consulting teams to support multiple projects remotely. Your experience would be valuable in developing that approach." "That sounds promising," I agreed. "I'm open to creative solutions that serve both the company's needs and my changing personal circumstances." After our call, I spent the day hiking the mountain trails surrounding the lake, allowing physical exertion to clear my mind. The divorce settlement had secured my financial position and primary residence, but rebuilding a meaningful life would require more than legal victories and property rights. It would demand a fundamental reassessment of priorities, a recalibration of the balance between professional achievement and personal fulfillment. The following week brought an unexpected development. Thomas Carter, my longtime friend and former colleague, called with a proposition. "I need a partner for my environmental consulting firm," he explained, without preamble when I answered. "Someone who understands water systems and can help me expand into sustainable irrigation projects. The business is growing faster than I can manage alone." "That's quite a proposition," I replied, genuinely surprised. "I assumed you were bringing on younger associates." "I've tried that route," Thomas admitted. "But what I really need is a partner with established expertise and aligned values, someone who understands both the technical and human elements of these projects." "I'm still with GreenFlow," I reminded him, "though I am exploring some changes to my role there." "This wouldn't have to be immediate," Thomas clarified. "Consider it an open invitation. Think about what you want the next phase of your career to look like, where you could make the most meaningful contribution." The offer lingered in my mind over the coming days, presenting an unexpected alternative to the career path I had followed. For 15 years, GreenFlow had been more than an employer. It had been a fundamental part of my identity, the context for my most significant professional achievements. Yet Thomas's offer represented something different. Not just a job change, but a fundamental shift in how my work would integrate with my life. A Denver-based partnership would eliminate extended international absences. It would offer partial ownership rather than employee status. Most significantly, it would involve building something new, creating systems and approaches, rather than simply implementing them within established parameters. As I contemplated these professional possibilities, The physical reclamation of the lake house continued. I replaced the chrome bathroom fixtures Rebecca and Jason had installed with the original bronze ones I'd carefully stored in the workshop. I restored the partially dismantled vanity, repairing the splintered joinery with patient attention. Each repair felt symbolic. Damage acknowledged, addressed, transformed into something sturdy again. Not identical to its original form, perhaps, but functional and even beautiful in its reconstituted state. The visible repair lines weren't flaws, but evidence of resilience, of the capacity to withstand damage and emerge intact. In the boathouse, they had planned to convert to a wellness cabana. I found fishing equipment I'd stored there, rods and tackle box used during weekend expeditions in earlier, happier years. On impulse, I unpacked them, checking lines and lures, preparing for potential use, rather than leaving them in storage as artifacts of a concluded chapter. 1 month after the settlement signing, I received notice from the court that our divorce had been finalized. The document arrived in a plain manila envelope, the legal terminology oddly sterile given the magnitude of what it represented. Dissolution of marriage seemed an inadequate phrase for the unraveling of more than a decade of shared life, the official severance of promises once believed permanent. I sat on the deck with this document, watching evening settle over the lake, feeling neither triumph nor devastation, but a complex mixture of regret, relief, and cautious anticipation. The legal process had concluded efficiently, largely due to my strategic preparation, and Rebecca's ultimate recognition that fighting would only diminish what remained for both of us. But the emotional processing would follow its own timeline, influenced by but not bounded by legal procedures. I understood this would be a gradual integration rather than an immediate resolution. Moments of unexpected grief interspersed with growing periods of genuine contentment, old patterns slowly replaced by new possibilities. That evening, I called my parents to inform them of the official divorce finalization. Their support had been unwavering throughout the process, offering practical help when needed, but respecting my desire to navigate the situation independently. "How are you feeling, son?" my father asked simply after I shared the news. "I'm okay," I replied, surprising myself with the simple truth of this statement. "Not great yet, but genuinely okay. The lake house helps, having a place that matters to me, that I can rebuild in whatever way makes sense now." "You've handled this with remarkable dignity," my mother added. "Many people in your situation would have been consumed by bitterness." "I've had moments of that," I admitted, "but ultimately it doesn't serve any purpose I value. Moving forward does." After we said our goodbyes, I remained on the deck until stars appeared, brilliant pinpoints in the clear mountain sky. The lake reflected their light, creating the illusion of infinite depth below, matching the infinite expanse above. Within this vastness, my individual experience, however painful or transformative, assumed an appropriate perspective, significant within the context of my life, but a tiny fragment of a much larger pattern. The next morning, I called Nathan at GreenFlow and declined the modified role he had proposed. Then I contacted Thomas and accepted his partnership offer, suggesting a transition timeline that would allow me to properly conclude my commitments to GreenFlow while beginning to shape this new professional direction. 2 days later, I received an unexpected email from Rebecca, the first direct communication since our final meeting at Elaine's office. The message was brief, stating simply that she would be collecting her remaining items from the lake house the following weekend and asking if morning or afternoon would be preferable. I responded with equal brevity, confirming that either time would be acceptable and that her belongings had been packed and stored in the garage for convenient retrieval. I considered offering to be absent during her visit, but decided against. This property, was now my primary residence, and while I had no desire for uncomfortable confrontation, I would not be displaced from my own home to avoid potential awkwardness. The designated Saturday arrived clear and cool. The mountains, crisp against a cloudless sky. I was splitting firewood near the workshop when Rebecca's Audi appeared on the driveway, the familiar hum of its engine triggering an unexpected wave of memories. Road trips to national parks, airport pickups after long absences, ordinary errands that formed the fabric of shared life. She parked near the garage, emerging alone, no Jason accompanying her on this final errand. She wore casual clothes rather than her usual polished professional attire, hair pulled back simply, minimal makeup. She looked younger somehow, more like the woman I had met at that charity fundraiser 14 years earlier. "Michael," she acknowledged with a nod as she approached. "Thank you for organizing everything." "Of course," I replied, setting down the axe and wiping my hands on my jeans. "The garage is unlocked. Everything should be clearly labeled." She glanced toward the lake, then back at the house. "You've been making changes," she observed, noting the newly stained deck and replaced window trim. "Some repairs, some improvements," I confirmed. "It's an ongoing project." She nodded, a flicker of something, regret perhaps, crossing her features. "Jason and I are no longer together," she said abruptly, "in case you were wondering." I wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected disclosure. "I'm sorry if that's difficult for you," I offered finally, genuine despite everything that had transpired. "It's for the best," she replied with a small shrug. "The business partnership collapsed when the funding didn't materialize, as expected. The personal relationship couldn't survive that reality check." I nodded, understanding more than she might realize. Business and personal entanglements created complex dependencies, vulnerabilities that became apparent only when circumstances shifted unexpectedly. "What about you?" she asked, gesturing vaguely toward the property. "Will you stay here permanently now?" "For the foreseeable future," I confirmed, "though I've accepted a partnership with Thomas's environmental consulting firm in Denver, so I'll be commuting several days a week." "You left GreenFlow?" Genuine surprise colored her voice. "After 15 years? "Sometimes change becomes necessary," I said simply, neither elaborating on my reasons nor inviting further discussion of my decisions. She seemed about to say something more, then appeared to reconsider. "I should get started with the boxes," she said instead, turning toward the garage. I returned to my wood splitting, providing her space to complete this final separation of our possessions. Through the open garage door, I could see her methodically sorting through boxes, selecting some items, leaving others. Occasionally she would pause, examining something with particular attention. A framed photograph, a book with an inscription, small artifacts of our shared history that now required categorization and division. An hour later, her car loaded with the selected items. She approached me again. "That should be everything," she said, keys in hand, clearly prepared to depart. "If I've left anything you think I might want, feel free to donate it." "I will," I assured her. "Safe travels back to Denver." She hesitated, then spoke with unexpected directness. "I want you to know that despite how things ended, I don't regret our marriage, Michael. We had many good years before things went wrong." The statement caught me off guard, not because it was untrue, but because it echoed thoughts I'd had while sorting through our shared possessions. There had been genuine love, shared purpose, meaningful connection, all eventually undermined by neglect, misalignment, and ultimately betrayal, but real nonetheless. "I believe that," I replied after a moment. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Rebecca." "You too," she said quietly, then turned and walked to her car without looking back. I watched her vehicle disappear down the driveway, feeling a strange sense of completion rather than renewed loss. This final interaction had provided a form of closure that legal documents alone could not offer, an acknowledgement of both what had been valuable and what had been irretrievably broken. As the sound of her car faded into the distance, I returned to splitting wood for the coming winter, each strike of the axe precise and purposeful. The pile of seasoned logs grew steadily beside me, preparation for whatever challenges the changing seasons might bring. I would face them from this reclaimed space, not unchanged by what had happened, but not defined by it either. The security system that had revealed the truth of my marriage remained active, its cameras monitoring the property's perimeter, its sensors tracking movement and environmental conditions. But its purpose had evolved, no longer a tool for uncovering deception, but a practical safeguard for a home often left empty during my commutes to Denver, a way of maintaining connection to this place, even when physically absent. In this, too, was a lesson about protection versus surveillance, about creating systems that preserved what mattered without attempting to control what could not be controlled. The difference was subtle, but crucial, the difference between security and paranoia, between healthy boundaries and restrictive barriers. As evening approached, I stacked the split wood on the covered rack against the workshop wall, satisfying physical labor completed for the day. Inside the house, I washed away sawdust and sweat, then prepared a simple dinner to enjoy on the deck as the setting sun cast long shadows across the lake. Tomorrow would bring another day of rebuilding, both the physical structure of this mountain retreat and the less tangible architecture of a life reconfigured. Not the life I had planned, certainly, but increasingly one I could embrace with genuine optimism, guided by clearer priorities and hard-won wisdom. The security system that had captured betrayal would now witness something different, the gradual emergence of new possibilities, the careful construction of a future built on stronger foundations than before. 1 year later, I stood on the rebuilt dock watching sunrise paint the mountains in gold and amber. The lake house had transformed, much like its owner. Fresh cedar siding replaced the weathered exterior. The deck now wrapped completely around the main level. Inside, the floor plan remained, but with subtle changes reflecting my preferences rather than compromises. The divorce had finalized 6 months ago. Rebecca had honored the financial terms, returning the funds as agreed. Through mutual friends, I heard she'd scaled back her marketing agency, focusing on smaller clients rather than the rapid expansion she'd pursued during our marriage. Jason had indeed moved back to Michigan, his wellness center dreams abandoned. My partnership with Thomas flourished beyond expectations. Our environmental consulting firm specialized in sustainable water systems for mountain communities, combining my technical expertise with his business acumen. The reduced travel suited me. 3 days in Denver, 4 at the lake house, finding balance I'd previously sacrificed. I'd started kayaking again, exploring hidden coves around the lake at dawn. Before the day tourists arrived, I joined the local conservation board, using my engineering skills to help protect the watershed that made this mountain paradise possible. Small steps toward integration into a community I'd previously visited but never truly inhabited. The security system remained, though its purpose had evolved. No longer a tool for uncovering betrayal, it provided peace of mind during my Denver days and helped me document wildlife visitors. A family of foxes that frequently explored my yard, a majestic bull moose that occasionally wandered across the property. Dating hadn't been a priority, though there had been a few connections. A fellow conservation board member, a professor from Denver, who rented a nearby cabin during summers. I approached these interactions differently, present rather than distracted, transparent rather than compartmentalized, learning from past mistakes without being defined by them. What surprised me most was the absence of bitterness. The betrayal had been real, the pain substantial, but time and reflection had transformed anger into something more valuable: discernment. I understood now how we had both contributed to our marriage's failure, how my focus on systems rather than connection had created space for deception to flourish. This morning, as light glimmered across the water, I felt genuine gratitude for the security system that had revealed painful truth. Without that technological witness, I might have remained in a hollowed-out marriage, building structures around an empty core. Instead, I had the opportunity to create something authentic, a life aligned with values I'd clarified through loss. I finished my coffee and headed inside to prepare for a meeting in Denver. The lake house waited, solid and welcoming, ready for my return. Not a monument to what was lost, but a foundation for what could still be built. Sometimes the most reliable security comes not from cameras and sensors, but from facing truth and choosing to rebuild with clearer vision. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.